Walking the remote beach around 7:30 this morning, found a torso and an arm.
You plotted and planned to kill, dismember, then you disrespectfully spread my daughter across the Milwaukee like a piece of trash. How dare you?
Maxwell Anderson was convicted of murdering and dismembering 19-year-old Sade Robinson. When Maxwell Anderson murdered my sister, he redefined my definition of misfortune. Sit with that for a second, not the word dismembered. That's the word that makes the headlines. Sit with the other part. My daughter was everything. Because before Sade Robinson was a case number, before she was pieces of evidence found in parks and washed up on beaches, she was somebody's everything. And that is where this story starts. Not with how she died, with who she was. April 1st, 2024. Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It is a Monday. An ordinary early spring Monday, the kind where the lake wind still has a bite to it, and everyone is just waiting for it to finally feel like April. Sade is 19 years old. She has a shift coming up at the pizza place she works at. She has a phone full of friends. She has a favorite color, and it is pink, and it is going to come back later in a way that breaks your heart. And on this Monday, Sade has a date. A first date. With a man she had met not long before. Dinner, drinks, the whole ordinary, hopeful thing that first dates are. She got dressed. She made plans. She told people where she was going, the way anyone would. And that was the last time anyone who loved Sade Robinson would ever see her whole and alive and herself. So how does a first date on an ordinary Monday end? With a mother standing in a courtroom, talking about pieces of her child scattered across a city. How does that happen? Let's get into it. And before we do, if you find value in these stories, if the way they are told honors the people they are about, take 1 second to subscribe. It genuinely helps keep them coming. Thank you. Sade Carleena Robinson was born on the 10th of May, 2004. Do that math for a moment. May of 2004. She was not even 20 years old when this story ends. She was a teenager. At 19, most people can barely keep a room clean, let alone carry the weight this young woman would end up carrying without ever choosing to. She was a Milwaukee girl, and by every single account from the people who knew her, she was light, she was funny, she was the friend who showed up. She had that quality that some people just have, where a room got a little warmer when she walked into it. She was 19. Think about everything that word holds. 19 is barely the beginning. 19 is still figuring out who you are going to be. It is late nights with friends, and shifts that run long, and a phone that never stops buzzing, and 100 small plans for a future you simply assume you are going to get. Sade had all of that. The ordinary, beautiful, unfinished business of being young. She was not a symbol. She was not a lesson. She was a girl who was still becoming herself. She worked at a place called Pizza Shuttle, a Milwaukee institution, the kind of local spot everybody in the neighborhood knows. And the people she worked with did not describe a coworker. They described family. They described someone they loved. That is not nothing. You can tell a lot about a person by how the people who see them every single day talk about them once they are gone. Nobody described Sade as difficult or distant or hard to love. They described light. They described someone who could make a long shift at a pizza place feel like being around family. If you have ever had a coworker like that, the one who made the bad days survivable, then you already know exactly what Milwaukee lost. Pink was her color. It was on her nails. It was her signature. Something so small, so 19, so alive. And here is something worth being honest about. When a case like this happens, the world learns a person's name for the very worst reason. Sade did not get to become famous for her laugh, or for the friend she was, or for the woman she was going to grow into. She got a headline instead, and a headline is not a person. So here is the person. A daughter, a sister, a coworker who felt like family, a 19-year-old with pink nails and a whole life still in front of her. That is who is lost. Hold on to her, because the next part of this story is about the man who crossed her path. His name is Maxwell Stephen Anderson. He was born in May of 1990, which made him 33 years old in the spring of 2024. Let that sit for a second too. 33. Sade was 19, he was not a peer. He was 14 years older than the young woman he took to dinner. Anderson lived in the Milwaukee area. He had served briefly in the United States Navy from 2011 into early 2012. In the years since, he had worked as a bartender at establishments around the city. On the surface, an ordinary man with an ordinary job in an ordinary town. But there was a record. And here it is, coldly, the way the court laid it out because it matters. Between 2014 and 2022, Maxwell Anderson had a string of arrests: domestic abuse, drunk driving, disorderly conduct, spread across Waukesha and Door counties. Those arrests did not necessarily predict what came next, because plenty of people have a messy record and never hurt a soul. But consider this, when a 19-year-old goes on a date with a 33-year-old man who has a documented history that includes abuse, and she has no way of knowing any of it. The imbalance in that room is something everyone should feel in their stomach, and that is the quiet horror at the center of so many of these cases. The danger did not look like danger. It looked like a guy with a steady job who knew how to make a drink. It did not come with a warning label. It never does. The people who do the most harm are very often the people who look the most ordinary, right up until the moment they are not. Sade had no file on him, no way to run a background check on a first date. She saw what he chose to show her, and what he chose to show her was normal. She saw a bartender, a date, a normal night. She could not see the rest. Here is that Monday, hour by hour, the way the evidence would later reconstruct it. And notice how normal it all looks right up until it isn't. One thing first, every timestamp that follows is real. This is not speculation. This is the record that phone data, surveillance cameras, and witnesses built, the same record a jury would later hear. So when the timeline shows the minute her phone went quiet, understand that this is documented fact, reconstructed second by second. That is what makes it so chilling. Her last hours can be watched almost like a clock ticking down, and there is nothing anyone can do now but watch. The afternoon of April 1st, they are texting. Between roughly 40:15 and 5:18 in the evening, Sade and Anderson trade messages about dinner plans. Where to meet? What time? The most ordinary conversation in the world. That evening, they go to a restaurant called the Twisted Fisherman. Surveillance cameras there would later capture them together, getting dinner, getting drinks. Two people on a date. And picture it honestly, because this is the part that is hardest to sit with. There was nothing wrong with this evening. Nothing a single person would have flagged. A young woman got dinner with a man she was getting to know. She had drinks. She laughed, probably. She did every single thing right. She met him in a public place. She let people know where she was going. This is not a story about a girl who was careless. This is a story about a girl who did everything we tell people to do, and it did not save her. From there, the night moves. Her location, tracked through her phone, places her next at a spot called Duke's on Water. And then, later, it places her somewhere far more private. Anderson's home, near 39th and Oklahoma on Milwaukee's south side. Surveillance would show two people arriving there at 9:24 that night. And then time keeps moving, the way it always does. And her phone keeps pinging from that address, until 12:45 in the morning, now April 2nd, when it stops. Just stops. At his house. This is where we have to be careful, because this is the moment the ordinary night becomes something else, and precision is what we owe Sade. What is known for certain is this. She went on a date. The night ended at his home, and after 12:45 a.m., Sade Robinson's phone went quiet, and Sade Robinson was never seen alive again. Morning, April 2nd. Sade does not show up for her shift at Pizza Shuttle, and to anyone who knew Sade, that was the first alarm bell, because she was reliable. She showed up. So when she didn't, the people who loved her knew immediately that something was wrong. She is reported missing. Feel that morning the way her family felt it. The not knowing, the calls that go straight to voicemail, the text messages that just sit there, delivered, unread. The slow, sick realization that this is not like her, that something has gone very wrong, while the rest of the world just goes about its Tuesday. Every family's worst nightmare starts exactly like this. Quietly, with a phone that will not pick up, and then the morning gets worse. Much worse. Across the city, near 30th and Lisbon Avenue, a car is found on fire. It is Sade's car, and a witness would describe seeing someone fleeing the scene. Their words. A taller white guy. Think about what that means. Her car, torched, miles from where her phone went silent. Someone was trying to erase something, and then comes the discovery that turned a missing person case into a nightmare a whole city would never forget. That same day, at Warnemont Park, down in Cudahy along the shore of Lake Michigan, someone finds a human leg. A severed leg with pink nail polish. There is the pink again. And this is how it comes back. DNA would confirm what everyone already feared. The remains belonged to Sade Robinson. The 19-year-old who had gone on a first date the night before was gone, and whoever did this had not just killed her. They had taken her apart. The detail stays restrained here because this channel is not about gore, and Sade is not a horror story. She is a human being. But the scale of what investigators were now facing has to be clear, because that leg in Warnemont Park was only the beginning of the search. Over the days that followed, this case would stop being about one location. It would become about an entire city. Here is where the case turns, and turns fast, because whoever did this made a critical mistake. They thought scattering Sade across the city would hide what happened. Instead, it left a trail. And Milwaukee investigators followed every single inch of it. Start with the phone data. Sade's phone told the story of her last night in cold, unarguable detail. The restaurant, Duke's, Anderson's home. The silence at 12:45 a.m. And then, in the pre-dawn hours, her phone pinged again, this time out at Warnemont Park, between roughly 3 and 40:30 in the morning. The exact place her leg would be found. Now put that next to the car. Her vehicle, set ablaze near 30th and Lisbon, and the witness who saw a taller white man leaving it. And then the remains kept surfacing, one terrible discovery after another, across days. April 5th, a body part near 30th and Lisbon, less than a mile from where her car burned. April 6th, remains at 31st and Galana. April 7th, more at 31st and Walnut. And near that last site, surveillance footage captured a figure matching Anderson's description on a Milwaukee County Transit bus. Do you see what is happening? The city itself was becoming the evidence. Every place her remains appeared, every camera, every ping, every witness was drawing a line. And that line kept pointing back to one man. And consider the sheer coldness of what that evidence described. This was not a killing done in a panic and then abandoned. Someone had taken the time to move her, to scatter her, to drive her car across the city and set it on fire, to ride a public bus through the aftermath. Each of those choices was a decision made with a clear enough head to try to cover the tracks. And here is the terrible irony. The colder the planning, the longer the trail. Every step taken to hide her left another mark pointing straight back. 4 days, that is all it took. On April 4th, before most of the remains had even been found, Milwaukee police arrested Maxwell Anderson. Investigators searched his home. They found blood on his walls. And to be fair and accurate, because the defense would later lean on this hard, that particular blood was tested, and it came back canine. Dog's blood, not human. It is a detail that mattered in court, and we will come back to it. On April 12, 2024, Maxwell Anderson made his first court appearance, and the charges laid against him were staggering in their coldness. First, degree intentional homicide, mutilating a corpse, hiding a corpse arson. 4 charges that, laid end to end, describe not a moment of rage but a sequence. A killing, a dismemberment, a scattering, a car set on fire to bury the truth. And while the legal machine started to turn, something else was happening out in the city. Milwaukee was grieving, and Milwaukee was furious. Sade's family and her community did not let her become just a name on a docket. They showed up for her. There was a pink out, her color, her signature worn in her honor. Later, in September of 2024, a mural of Sade would be painted at the pizza shuttle where she worked, so that the place that loved her would carry her face. And her family founded something lasting. Sade's Voice Foundation, a way to make sure that her name would stand for protection and awareness, and not only for the worst night of her life. Because here is what a city does when it decides a young woman will not be forgotten. It wears her color in the streets. It paints her face on the wall of the place she worked, so that every customer, every day, sees her and remembers. It turns private grief into something public and protective. Milwaukee did not just mourn Sade Robinson. Milwaukee claimed her. It said out loud, "This was one of ours, and we will carry her name." That is what love does in the face of something like this. It refuses to let the horror have the last word. More than a year later, in late May of 2025, Maxwell Anderson went on trial in Milwaukee. And here are both sides, honestly, because that is what a fair telling requires. The prosecution built its case the way you would expect, brick by brick, out of everything the city had handed them. The phone data that traced Sade's last night to Anderson's door, and then to the park where her leg was found. The surveillance from the restaurant. The figure matching Anderson on that transit bus near a recovery site. Her burning car. The timeline that left almost no room for anyone else. Their argument was simple and devastating. The last person with Sade Robinson was Maxwell Anderson. The physical evidence and the digital evidence both pointed to him. This was, in the words of the lead prosecutor, the highest level of violence imaginable. The defense pushed back. They pointed to that blood on the wall, the blood that turned out to be canine, and argued the state was stretching. They questioned the physical evidence directly tying Anderson's own hands to the dismemberment. They reminded the jury that the burden of proof sits with the prosecution, and that suspicion is not the same thing as certainty. That is their job. In our system, even in a case this painful, the accused gets a defense. And they mounted one. Jurors sat through 8 days of testimony. 8 days of the worst details imaginable, laid out in a courtroom, with Sade's family sitting right there, living through it again. Hold that image, because a trial gets talked about like it is only about evidence and law, and it is. But for a family, a trial is 8 days of hearing what happened to your child described out loud, in clinical detail, by strangers in a room where the person who did it is sitting a few feet away. Sade's family did that. They sat through all of it. They did not look away. They stayed for her because someone had to be in that room loving her while the worst of it was read into the record. And then, on June 6, 2025, it went to the jury. They were out for less than an hour, around 45 minutes. 45 minutes to find Maxwell Anderson guilty on every single count. First-degree intentional homicide, mutilating a corpse, hiding a corpse, arson, all of it. But a verdict is a legal fact. It is not the heart of a day like this. The heart came at sentencing on August 1st, 2025.
But to lose your child in this manner is unthinkable.
When the people who loved Sade finally got to speak, her mother stood up and looked at the man who did this and said the words this story opened with. "You plotted and planned to kill, dismember, then you disrespectfully spread my daughter across Milwaukee like a piece of trash. How dare you? My daughter was everything." Her sister spoke about a grief that redefined the word misfortune, about never getting to show Sade how proud she was of her, about how the one person who took that away was sitting right there in the room. And through all of it, Maxwell Anderson maintained his innocence. Even then, even convicted, he gave the family nothing. The judge, Laura Crivello, said she saw no accountability from Anderson through the entire trial, and so she handed down the maximum. Life in prison, without the possibility of parole. He will die in prison. He was sent first to Dodge Correctional Institution and later moved out of state. Sade's family will never have to worry about him walking free. And here is the thing to understand about a day like that sentencing. The maximum sentence is not a happy ending. There is no happy ending here. There is only a floor placed under the family's grief, a guarantee that this man will never do this to anyone else's daughter. That is real, and it matters, and Sade's family fought for it. But when the cameras leave and the courtroom empties, they still go home to a world with a Sade-shaped hole in it. Justice and healing are not the same thing. Justice they got. Healing is a much longer road. It is justice. It is as much justice as a courtroom can ever give. But you know the same as anyone does, that it does not bring her back. It never does. Maxwell Anderson has said he plans to appeal. As of now, the conviction stands, and the life sentence stands. Appeals are a normal part of the system, and a defendant is entitled to file one. But to be clear about where things stand today, so nobody watching is confused. A Milwaukee jury heard the evidence and convicted Maxwell Anderson on every count. A judge looked at him, saw no remorse, and gave him the maximum the law allows. He is in prison for the rest of his life. That is the reality. Everything else is paperwork. But there is one more thing to tell, and it is the hardest part of this entire story. They never found all of her. Sade's remains surfaced across weeks and across state lines. Her torso and an arm were recovered in South Milwaukee on April 18th, more than 2 weeks after she was reported missing. In May, another of her arms washed ashore all the way down in Waukegan, Illinois, carried there by Lake Michigan. And her head was never recovered. It has never been found. Understand what that means for a family. Most people, when they lose someone, get to lay them to rest, whole. That one small mercy. Sade's family was denied even that. They buried what they could find of their girl, and they have had to carry the rest as an open wound that does not close. That is the true cruelty of this case. Not just that he took her life, that he took her back in pieces and scattered her, and made sure her family could never fully bring her home. What remains, what truly remains, is not the horror. It is the foundation in her name. It is the mural on the wall of the pizza place. It is the pink. It is a community that refused to forget her. And that matters more than anything Maxwell Anderson did. Because his plan, the whole cruel architecture of it, was erasure. He tried to make her disappear. He tried to make sure there was nothing left to find, nothing to bury, nobody to mourn over. And he failed. He failed completely. Her name is on a foundation. Her face is on a wall. Her color is worn by a city. She is more present in death than he will ever be in the prison cell where he is going to spend the rest of his life. He wanted her gone. Instead, she is unforgettable. Sade Carleena Robinson was 19 years old. She loved the color pink. She was a daughter, a sister, a coworker who felt like family, a friend to more people than she probably ever knew. She had a whole life ahead of her, and it was stolen by a man who then tried to erase her from the earth. He failed, because her name is being said right now, and you will remember it. That is who she was. To her mother, to her sister, to her friends, and to everyone still grieving her, our deepest condolences. Rest in peace, Sade Carleena Robinson. And to you, watching, let stories like Sade's help you recognize the warning signs. The age gap that felt like nothing. The history there was no way to see. Look out for the people you love, and let them look out for you. Trust the feeling in your stomach. It is so often right. Until the next case, this is the Crime Almanac.